Welcome, folks. Welcome to Walking on the Weene Side, part of It Matters Radio. And today I'm chatting with the wonderful host of It Matters Radio, Monica Brinkman. Monica, you and I have both recently relocated.
Yes.
Talk a little about where you came from and where you went.
I came from the Midwest. We had moved there to be with my husband's side of the family for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But we ultimately always wanted to retire in the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved to the mountains in California, and it's just beautiful, and we love it.
Mm-hmm. The mountains of California. So you're not right on the ocean. You're inland.
Right.
And it's gorgeous there. How far are you from what is it, Yosemite, I guess? Huh?
Not that far, really. We're actually closer though if you go towards like Lake Tahoe and that way.
That's beautiful. Tahoe is just one of my favorite places, except for all the people.
Well, actually, I'm in a little teeny town here, and I love it.
Mm.
The larger towns are so near. They take you, 20 minutes to get there if you really want to, go to the big malls, and there's tons of them. But it's nice, I think, at least at this point in my life, to be able to come to a place where it's very peaceful. I mean, we're right in the mountains, so you can imagine there's all types of deer and bear and animals. And it's just, a nice thing to have. It gives you kind of a peaceful mind at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, having grown up so much of my life in Maine, in rural Maine, I really was not up for a tiny town, but we also downsized in location. We moved from Phoenix, which is, of course, the fifth largest metropolitan area in the United States now.
Oh, yeah, huge.
And we moved about 120 miles south to Tucson, Tucson is really a cool city. It's about 500,000, and it's wonderfully diverse. Well, in a sense, diverse, mainly that it's divided between a Mexican population and an Anglo population. And the Mexican population here, though, makes it really feel so much different. And it's a much slower pace, but we can still get to all the things because we're much more city people than you and Rich. We like getting to the theater and.
Oh no, we're the same way, Ken.
Possible.
We've been going to theater for years.
Well, you have been in theater.
Yeah, but I mean, Rich and I have gone to many shows, and that's what I like about having something nearby. Tucson's beautiful, though. I mean, I'm sure you're gonna just adore it there. Are there any native Indian tribes near there?
Yes, not as close as with Phoenix. With Phoenix, they actually were reservations around, but the Tohono O'odham are right on the border, which interesting. That's a big topic these days, of course, border security. And one of the fascinating issues here is that the Tohono O'odham actually live on the border.
Right on the border.
The reservation abuts a Mexican reservation, I believe it is, whatever system they use there, of the same tribe. And literally, I mean, on one side of the line, you're born there, you're a U.S. citizen. And if you're born on the other side of the line, your cousin is born on the other side of the line. She is a Mexican citizen.
Well, what happens if a wall goes up?
Well, that's the big issues is whether the legal issue is whether or not the government can impose that wall. And of course, the Tohono O'odham are quite determined that it should never go up.
Right.
They should never be
that's
divided.
their living space. It's their home. Yeah. That's going to be interesting. We'll have to follow that as the days go by.
And to a certain degree, there are issues here that go beyond this. For example, some years ago, an Apache friend of mine invited me to go down to the area of Mexico where the rebellions are going on, where there's heavy duty stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
And, I didn't go for a couple of reasons, but I said to him, well, how do we get in there? What do we just go across the border, and then disappear in Mexico? What? He says, oh, no, you don't cross the border because you don't want them to know. What we do is we go through the tribal lands and then they move us. So, and in point of fact, some of the claims about the border and how porous it is, there's some reality to it. I mean, not everything that the far right is saying about the border security is totally off the wall, except
no. And it's been something. I mean, it's been in every administration that I can think of.
Yeah.
This issue.
This is one of the areas where, from my experience, but the thing is, the big problem is that the people crossing the border illegally are not coming, in this instance, coming from Mexico and South America. It's Americans going down there.
No, and Ken, that's a very important thing to bring out. And people don't want to believe this, but it's been happening since I can remember. Mm-hmm. People are making money off of this. Mm-hmm. And everyone has to remember that. Mm-hmm. And there are some big time people involved in this.
Oh, yeah.
Whether anyone wants to believe it or not.
Right. And some of the things that are going on are really very, very peculiar. Now, I got to bring up another topic that goes right along with that, which is drugs. Because a few years back, I got to sit down with a Mexican drug dealer. And let me explain how this happens. I was down on the border in a little town. Actually, it's an interesting little town. I forget the name right now, but it's where Pancho Villa came across Douglas.
Yeah, remember they learning about it. I mean,
yeah, and the U.S. dropped bombs on him out of the biplanes. They dropped me. Anyway, this is this little border town, and I'm sitting there in the restaurant of the hotel. It's this grand old hotel. Actually, one of the things they have there is a chip in the marble steps inside the hotel where Pancho Villa's horse had chipped the marble. Anyway, I'm having supper there, and I'm with a friend who is involved in charity work, and specifically an orphanage south of the border. And his friend is there, and his friend is a drug lord, an avowed drug lord. And my friend introduces him that way, and the guy says, yeah, that's what I do. I bring drugs into the United States. And he said, of course, he says, I never bring them myself because I could go to jail. He says, and then I'd be stopped from doing my business. He says, so I have other people bring it in, but they're my drugs. And I said, well, I'm getting a little uncomfortable here. I'm, talking with criminal and all. But it got to be a very interesting discussion. And one of the fascinating things about that this man told me is he says, don't ever believe that some Mexican or South American has guns and they're shooting at your border patrol. He says it would be stupid.
Yeah.
I can go out on the street in my hometown, buy $100 worth of drugs, get them across the border, and they're worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm caught with those drugs, or my runner is caught with those drugs, they get like 3 years in jail, of which they serve maybe 1.
Yeah, that's so.
If they're caught with a gun, they're going to spend a minimum of 3 years in jail, maybe more. Now, for $100, remember, the government is telling you, your American government is telling you it's thousands of dollars. That's why we'd have guns, but it isn't. It's $100. Would you give up an extra 2 years of your life to be in jail for $100?
Oh no.
Would.
No.
Nobody would. He says, that's what this is all really happens. And then he told me what happens. He says, my man brings the drugs to a farm, to a ranch here on the border. We get it across the border, and the rancher, whom we're paying, okay, stashes it. Then an American runner comes and picks it up and takes it to its destination. Most of those American runners are either Border Patrol or sheriff's deputies.
No, it's true. It's been like this forever, Ken.
When there is a gunfight, it's between Border Patrol and sheriff, or between sheriff's departments. He says, there are no Mexicans.
I know it, and people don't want to believe the truth, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Very interesting.
Yeah. So we as a group, as a country, have got to start understanding that the war on drugs is not about Mexico or even Colombia. It's really a war involving ourselves. Just as when the Nicaraguan fiasco was going on years ago, and the CIA was bringing the drugs in. To find, by the way, between here and Tucson and Phoenix, is the airstrip where the CIA used to bring the drugs in.
Ah, interesting.
And when they got caught, okay, boy, I'm telling some real stories here. My friends, there's an Apache reservation, and they were approached by an American company that wanted to develop their airport. You know, they have an airstrip, it's like a puddle jumper airstrip. And we'll pave it, we'll put in proper navigating equipment, and all you have to do is let us use it for our business. Well, who do you think this company is? It's the company, it's the CIA, and I was able to trace back who these people were, some of these people.
Ken, this was brought out, I remember, and none of the young people brought this out when it was happening, and none of the older, their parents and such, wanted to believe such a thing.
How could our country be involved in things like that?
But it's all about profits, and that's what's so sad.
Well, yes, profits, but also you've got to remember profits for whom, okay? Because, like, it would be one thing if, let's say, General Motors was bringing in this stuff, and it was General Motors workers who were involved, and with the runners and with the bringing in the planes. And then you could say, well, yeah, it's all about profits. But we're talking about Border Patrol. We're talking about the Sheriff's Department. We're talking about the CIA. We're talking about not profits, but the government. And what is the government's stake?
The government is making a huge amount of money. The businesses are.
Well, the government,
because of this. If they stop the drugs, there'll be no more drug testing.
Oh, well, yeah, those are the orders of it. But I'm talking about what does the government itself want to do with the money? You know, like all of the money, what is the government doing with the money we don't know about is what I'm raising. Now, the CIA and NSA, that's pretty clear. But even like, okay, now recently in Boston, okay, very far from the border, they found out that the state police had been basically raping the Treasury, stealing the money and giving it to themselves. I mean, it was, you know, individual. But this question is, who is policing the police? Who is policing the CIA? Who is policing the government, both in terms of personal greed and also in terms of the more nefarious things they do? For example, the CIA is using its money to play selling missiles to Iran and you know, I mean, and sending guns to what became the Taliban. I mean, a lot of the weapons that are being sent to bad people
Oh yeah,
Bad people.
and that's happened for decades.
Yeah. And
Also,
there's no accountability. And therein lies the problem. How do we as Americans hold our government accountable?
well, it's time we did hold them
Mhm.
accountable for their actions, and I think that's what this is all about. Whether it's not party, it's nonpartisan. We
Oh,
want them held accountable. Everyone does.
yeah. And, I think this little break we're going to take now in the book that we're going to be telling people about might just help them understand some of this.
Sounds great, Ken. See you in a bit.
Welcome back to Walking on the Weene Side. Monica, I'm wondering, some of these people, what do you think is going to happen to them in the next life? I'm not talking about heaven and hell so much as reincarnation. I kind of like the idea of reincarnation. I mean, what are they going to come back as, some of them?
I think people need to be really cautious about how they act and the choices they make in life, because the things that you do to others, or don't do for that matter,
Mm.
will be things that I believe are challenges you're going to have to meet in the next life. because you didn't learn your lesson that first time. And
Mhm.
now you're going to learn it. And you're going to keep learning it until you get it.
All right. So, yeah, we're talking about the notion of karma here,
Yes.
and how one life will yeah, and of course, eventually, of course, we turn into Buddhisti and we reach nirvana and we don't have to keep coming back.
Yeah, you become part of it all.
I want to come back as a stuffed animal personally.
Yeah, but you have to be with the right person. You want to
That's
be that stuffed animal they pull the eyes off of, and
that's true. That's a very good point. I want to come back like my friend Potty Moose up here who sits
I'll
over.
bring Potty over.
Well, I'm going to try and get you to see Potty. He in his perch up there first. He's up. You see, he's on top of the bookcase.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll go get him because Potty loves the, all three of our. Well, I shouldn't forget Spotted Fido, Potty's little dog, but we have three stuffed animals, and they are very important in our lives
Oh yeah.
because we no longer, sadly, we no longer have the capacity to have, dogs and cats and pets in our home. We used to have dogs and horses, and I know you have dogs and cats, and you have to have that source of unconditional love in your life.
Yes.
I think that's part of what makes for a good sense of karma in your life is to have that. So Potty loves me, and he has no choice about it. You see, isn't that wonderful?
And we want to see his face.
You want to see Potty's face? Okay.
Hello there. He's such a cuteness.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because the three animals, Potty's the only one who stays in here with me all the time, but we have a sloth named Thackeray, and we have a bear named Bear. Now, Bear is a grump.
I've met Bear.
Yeah. And today, yes, you have. And today, Thackeray held a healing session with Bear.
Oh.
And we're very eager to see whether Bear smiles a little more today and perhaps relaxes a bit.
I think that will help.
Yeah, I think so. Have you ever had a healing session?
I've done self-healing, but I've never had someone do it for me.
It's a wonderful sense, I think, that of vulnerability. I think that that's what healing does for us. It allows us to feel vulnerable, and therefore to allow that sense of safety and protection. I imagine, I don't honestly remember being a little, I remember a couple things from when I was a baby, but I don't really remember that sense of comfort. I unfortunately, coming from the background I do, I don't remember, for example, relaxing in the bath. I never knew whether my mother was going to pour hot water on me or cold water or push
what
me.
to expect next.
Yeah, what to expect next. But I would imagine that maybe when I was a very, very tiny baby, that I got some of that kind of sense of comfort and relaxing.
Yeah, I bet so. I bet so.
Yeah.
And it's quieting the mind, I think, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm. So you can let some of the good feelings in, some of the comfort feelings.
I think children can have that ability.
They can. Mm-hmm.
Because they use their imagination, they go off into another world and they quiet, other things around them.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I was really young, I would get so engrossed in a TV show, people could shout at me. I swear to you, Ken, and I wouldn't hear them.
Mm-hmm.
that's getting to that place where you're just totally focused on one thing, whether it's your inner self, and feeling that, or a TV show. You have all your focus on one thing.
And my wife says that's because I'm getting deaf.
Oh, no, that could be too. Have to check it out. It doesn't work well in life. I mean, could you imagine you're at work and you're so involved in this thing you don't hear the phone ring?
Oh, well, actually, when I'm writing, yeah, well, I can reach that kind of level of sense. But I remember as a kid, in fact, I just wrote a blog piece for 50 authors in 50 states about Maine, and I'm talking about just lying there on the grass up in Maine. This is the first time I'd been up there. I was like 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just lying there. And there's two skunks coming
Oh,
around.
no.
Oh, well, skunks are very friendly and
They
very,
are.
yeah, and very inquisitive. And so and I'm just totally enmeshed in being there and watching these animals. And I remember, like I said, I remember some things from that's not infancy, but pretty early in life. And just being mesmerized by these skunks.
Well, they're beautiful, first
Oh,
of
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And it's just what they can do.
Yeah, they can be rather unpleasant. They say they make, I know they make wonderful pets, because years later I had a client who had one, but I think it's rather cruel to make them.
Yeah.
It's not their,
No, let them live their life where they want to live, in their habitat. Absolutely.
Yeah. And let's not take out their anal glands. They need them.
Absolutely. I think a lot more people can. I don't know if you've noticed it, but they're turning towards spirituality.
Yes, I've noticed that, and I know you write about that a great deal in your work. And the funny thing about it is, of course, most of it. I mean, I consider myself more spiritual and quote religious. And the thing is that were we alive in the Middle Ages, and we'd all be tried as heretics.
Yes, we would.
I think 90%. Well, I shouldn't say 90, but an awful lot of Americans.
But if you go back further, we would be praised.
Yes, well, there was. Yeah, I think that what many Americans, and I think many Europeans too, believe in is much closer to the Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
And to the early Christian doctrines, pre-church doctrines.
I think a lot of people are believing, and I'm not telling anyone how to believe when I say anything, but I think a lot of people are believing that much of what people consider the Bible and the truth was created by man to control people.
Well, I think there are. Well, of course, now we're talking about a tremendous split in American culture, a huge split that is going on. And I want to come back to that topic and talk a little more about it. But before we do that, Monica, I'd like people to know a little bit about one of your books. So maybe we could take a break and share one of your book trailers.
Hey, that sounds great.
We'll be right back.
Okay, here you go.
welcome back to Walking on the Weene Side. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about that topic of religion. And you notice Potty is long, he climbed back up on his bookcase because he doesn't like talking about religion much.
Yeah,
he just likes to live it. But, we in this country, you were saying that the huge numbers of us in this country really are more spiritual than religious. We believe that we should be searching inwardly for God and connecting to something more than ourselves and things like that. But, there are also people who take the Bible very literally.
Yes.
And
I respect them for that.
Yeah, I can respect them. But sometimes their views become a little scary to me. And, as you know, I've talked a couple times on the show about Reconstructionist Christianity.
Well, that is scary.
Yeah.
Let people know what that is, Ken, in case they...
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that. And dispensationalism. Those are the two things. I'm going to start with dispensationalism. And dispensationalism, I think I really ran into that concept when I read some of Jimmy Carter's stuff, the president, and he talks about not being a dispensationalist. Now, dispensationalism is this view of time, of history, that is developed back away in England, in which, and it talks about different time periods in history based on the Bible. So, for example, there's the creation period. And then there's the period of the I almost would call prehistory period, where from creation, people just keep breeding and the world, people kind of relocating and all of that. And then you get the monotheistic beginnings, the Abraham and the beginning of Judaism. And then and that is marked, of course, by the willingness of man to subjugate himself. And man, of course, being man, women have very...
Right, mankind. Yeah.
No, but not mankind.
Humankind.
Not humankind, man. They're very sexist. To subjugate himself to God, to the male God. And of course, that's monumentally, that time frame really begins with the sacrifice of Isaac, or if you're Islamic, the sacrifice of Ishmael. But when Abraham takes his son up onto the mountain. And then you have the next period, the big period, is the, I guess you'd call it the post-Moses period. But each of these is called, is a period. And it's a period, and there are time frames. And of course, the ultimate time frame is the coming of the second coming of the Messiah, and the end of this world as we know it, Armageddon, evil is defeated, and all of that wonderful stuff. Well, that idea of the being these time periods is dispensationalism. And so the dispensationalists believe that basically we are now approaching the end times. And therefore, we should be preparing for the end. And we see that periodically. I mean, oh God, the comet's coming. We're all going to be lifted up. The people like Jim Jones. We see these in cult all the time. But what we don't realize is that there are many people in this country who actually day to day believe that the end times are coming, and they want to help that along. Okay, so for example. One of the things that people notice is that evangelical Christians, a lot of them, are very pro-Israel. Well, they're pro-Israel because they want the battle. And the battle takes place there in the Holy Land. Armageddon is going to be, and we need all the Jews there so we can have the battle.
Yeah. these people are joyful about it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They want
Their
the.
eyes light up and they get like crazy and they're like, I can't wait.
Well,
It's insanity.
well, as insane as that becomes, the Reconstructionists are another step beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
because they believe it is their responsibility to create the, I guess you call it the culture, the society of the saved, and to live in keeping with their notion of the biblical rules, so that when this happens, when the end times come, and they are coming, they are the ones who will be saved. And so, for example, they would impose their view of government on us.
Uh-huh.
And that view includes something very interesting. First of all, there is very little government. Government is local. That's why when, for example, you have a county clerk in Kentucky saying, no, I'm not going to register these evil homosexual marriages.
Uh-huh.
And we say to ourselves, well, that's just one little crazy lady. No, it's the movement. You see, it is at the county level it's supposed to take place.
I've heard it's infiltrated much higher.
Well, yeah, this guy named Mike Pence, I think he's very much a Reconstructionist.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people in the Trump administration are Reconstructionists and or dispensationalists. So they either see this as the end time, or they see the need to prepare us for living in the end time. And their goal, by the way, one of the big differences is dispensationalists at least believe in a loving God. They're less Calvinist. The Reconstructionists are strict Calvinists, and they believe only a small number, the elect, will be saved. And they don't care what happens to the rest of us, by the way, folks.
You know what gets me about all of that, Ken? Okay, we're created from God. Male, female, combination, whatever. You know, everything's created from God.
If you believe
So
it.
we are all a part of God.
Yeah.
So by them killing all these souls, except for just them,
But they're not
they're
doing
killing their own selves. And that is not something that any God would want to have part of himself, his spirit, murdered.
Yeah, but you see, the Reconstructionists are not killing the souls. In fact, they accuse us, if we support a woman's right to choose, that we're killing a soul. I mean, they're very protective of that. It's just that once the soul is there, they don't care what happens to it. And therein lies this the contradiction you're making. You know, in their notion of God, which of course all goes back to just the book of Revelations, because it's nowhere else is it really there in the Bible. When they when they say God is going to do these things, they're saying God hates, God wants to kill, destroy, God considers an abomination that which is not what to God's saving grace. And, you know, maybe a perfectly good person, but God, I know you're nothing like you are. Well, in saying that, of course, they're also saying, hey, you know, God hates Satan. Well, God doesn't hate Satan. I mean,
God loves Satan.
Yeah, if you really understand the Bible, as I understand it, the Satan, you know, if you look at the book of Job, you know, Satan and God are sitting there side by side and talking. Satan is the force of doubt. Satan is the force to think. And yes, can it lead us astray? Of course it can. You know, not every decision I've ever made in my life, looking back, has been good.
No, me either. Heavens, but I've learned from him, hopefully.
Yeah, but the implication of Satan is that we can learn. And of course, in the end, that's what the book of Job teaches us, even though to me it's always seemed a very cruel book. But because Job, yeah, he gets a new wife. Great. What happened to the old one? But at least you have the sense that, hey, we can learn from our mistakes. We can learn from what we do.
Yeah.
Now, Jesus comes along and he's saying, hey, God is love. God loves us all. And yet, now these reconstructionists are saying, well, he's conditional love, not unconditional. Hey, again, us he's going to save, you guys into the pit, and God could care less. Well, if God could care less who gets thrown into the pit, then I guess, for me, what's the point of a God? I mean, should I be worshiping this God? Should I be caring about this God? Or should I be trying to figure out ways to destroy this God so the world could be a better place? To me, that God that is so condemning of others is signing his own death warrant.
No, you're right, Ken, and I think karma plays a big part in all religions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's underlying. Also, there's people that believe not only do words and past events show religion, but they believe that all of our planets and such are placed in a certain area to coincide.
Astrology. And
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you brought that up because it for a long time, science dismissed things like astrology, still to a large extent does. But now we're discovering something called entanglement.
Yeah, I was reading about that.
And how that electron way over there can be influencing that electron way over there. And if that's the case, then is it possible that where the moon was when I was born, or where that heavenly body was, could somehow be entangled with me?
Right. But can people even understand when there's a full moon, different things happen?
Oh, no, wait a minute. I thought we agreed, Monica, you weren't going to talk about that secret side of me.
About the werewolf?
Yeah.
Oh, darn it. Let it out. What can I say? We were saving it for Halloween, right?
Right.
No, but even the tides are affected by the planets and our solar system. And if God created the earth, he created everything else within it. So why did he place this here and this here and this over here and the things we can't even see that are still out there?
Okay.
Is there an order?
Or alternatively, God is random. Because, I'm a Spinozan, which is a very different view of the world, which is that God really is not a creating force, but rather the unknown. Like you remember in the old charts, the old navigation charts back in the Middle Ages, where it would say, "Here dragons dwell on the earth." Yeah. And that's what God is for me. God is what we don't know. And the interesting thing is, the boundaries of God are constantly changing for me as a Spinozan. That even as we understand more and more of the science of, let's say, quantum mechanics, it raises other questions and more questions.
And so I don't think we're ever supposed to learn this. And so why are we basing wars and destruction upon something that no one's going to ever really know until they pass over?
Well, You know, that's a very good question. Why do we have wars and destruction at all? And that might be a great topic for us to talk about
Yeah, I think we should.
another time. I think we have pretty well used up our time today, but I want to thank you, Monica Brinkman, for joining me here on Walking on the Weene Side. And of course, folks, remember that besides doing this show, It Matters Radio has its regular music show, and join Monica for that. And come back and join me for another walk on the Weene Side. Who knows what I'll be talking about next?
You never know, folks. So watch. Bye-bye.
Bye.